We are learning more about the deadly shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. More than 2 years after that tragedy, the city released some additional files related to the massacre. In one 911 call, a man who says he was the shooter's uncle reaches out.
Uvalde County 911.
Ma'am, there's something that's happening at Robb's. He's my nephew, ma'am. He's the shooter.
Who's your nephew, sir?
I was wondering maybe he could listen to me because he does listen to me. Everything I tell him, yes, ma'am. Maybe he could stand down or do something, just turn himself in.
You hear the desperation in his voice wanting to intervene. The police response to that shooting heavily criticized, and rightfully so. The victims were left with the gunman for more than an hour. 376 officers on the scene. It took 77 minutes from when the shooter entered the school for police to confront and kill him. 19 students in the process and 2 teachers were killed. 17 others were injured. Trial attorney Stephanie Sherman joins us this morning. She filed the first federal lawsuit on behalf of the families of 3 children who survived that deadly day. Thank you for your time this morning. First of all, your reaction to this latest rounds of records that were released. It was not a willful release. It took a lot of time to get to this. Did it reveal anything new?
Thank you so much for having me this morning. It's really heartbreaking to hear those words. And this is exactly what I was fearful for when I was speaking to news agencies before, is that the total concealment of evidence. Now we are 2 years past the shooting, and many of the victims, especially those that have passed away, their statute of limitations has expired. I represent survivors, especially ones that are still living, one of which was shot in one of the classrooms. So our statute of limitations is a little bit different. But to me, this was a total and complete chaotic disaster, just more problems with this shooting and withholding that evidence. And for what? It was really just to thwart the efforts of the families for getting answers. So it's very heartbreaking to hear this.
How has the experience working with and getting to know the survivors that you represent guided the legal steps through this process?
Well, it's just been one obstacle after the other, to be honest. So Texas has so many bars to justice for this case. It's really one of the challenging cases that I have and have worked on in over 25 years because of the state of the law. So in Texas, you cannot sue the police and you cannot sue the school. That they both have immunity under the civil justice system in Texas. So you must file a civil rights case and argue that there was a violation of the Constitution, which is a whole nother level of challenge, because the bar to get past that and what you're required to prove is much, much, much higher. So it's been very difficult to counsel the families and tell them, we don't have a lot of options. We have to keep going because laws need to be changed and justice needs to be happen, but it is not a clear path to justice like it has been for other victims in other states.
And what is their greatest hope out of this tragedy and their horrific experience? What does accountability and moving forward look like?
Well, it's really true. So it's interesting. This is a small community in South Texas. And so it's a very tight community, a close-knit community. People know each other. And what's happening in local politics there, you have people that were responding to the shooting, people that should have protected their children, running for offices and getting jobs and running for city council or whatever. And so they're active in the local community, and the families are like, no, we don't want them around. They did not protect our children. So it's a little bit different when you're dealing with a small town, and they absolutely want accountability. And thankfully, the district attorney has indicted at least 2 officers that I'm aware of. And so they will have a criminal trial. So that is a positive step, absolutely a positive step. And the other thing they'd like to see is change and have reasonable gun laws. So again, this was an 18-year-old that was allowed to access an AR-15, and that shouldn't be happening, not near schools, not anywhere. And so they would like to have reasonable gun laws to make sure that people are getting hold of these high-powered, precise killing machines, that they have the proper training, that they know what they're doing, that they're mature and not just newly 18 off the street without any experience, because it exposes the whole entire community to harm like it did now. And so this community is completely, it's destroyed.
Yeah, and will never be the same. And I think of kids right now and their families getting ready to return to school. And you have to talk about how difficult that is 2 years later and will forever be for the kids and families that you represent. What does that process look like and the emotional weight they carry?
Well, it's so we hear a lot about post traumatic stress disorder, especially from our veterans coming back for the war. The symptoms and things that these kids are going through, and when I talk to my young clients, that's how they feel. They sound like combat veterans because when they hear a car that's loud or a slammed door or any kind of firecrackers, fireworks, things out. I have one of my kids, he's 12. He doesn't want to go to the store because there's too much going on. There's too many loud noises going on, or you'll hear like a sudden drop of a book on a floor. Those little things we take for granted are very startling and create fear in these young kids. And with them developing and their maturity and lack of just experience in the world, it's very terrifying for them.
No, I can't imagine. It's the unthinkable, the nightmare that they live. Thank you for being their voice. For what it's worth, please pass along our best, Stephanie Sherman. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.